welcome to episode 3 of Chained, the next link in movie podcasting. Literally, Jack from Jacked In here, joined by Carl from Dark Matters. How's it going, Carl?
Yeah, great to see you again, Jack, and fantastic to be back for episode 3 already. This is great, and thank you to all the people who've been commenting and jumping on board, climbing the chain with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, return listeners, thank you so much for sticking with. We are eternally grateful. New listeners, welcome. In case you didn't know what the premise is, I'm going to let Carl take you through it so that you're in the know.
The chain that we're building, it's basically picking genre actors, linking them a movie at a time, one to another, in the biggest chain that we can possibly make. And we've started with the first 2 episodes, began American Werewolf in London with Jenny Agutter, which linked us to Brian Glover in Alien 3. And now we're moving on to link number 3. So who was the actor and what was the film that we picked for this one, Jack?
So I went and chose Charles Dance from Alien 3, and the movie I picked him to be in for this episode, The Last Action Hero.
Yeah, very excited to be talking about this one. You're talking as one of the world's biggest Arnie fans when I was around the time this came out. And interesting film, lots to talk about, I think.
It definitely flew under the radar, and we're going to touch on it more. But yeah, it's an Arnie favourite of mine, which is why I picked it, especially Charles Dance. Which is why I picked him in it. And like I say, we'll be picking it to bits as we go on. But first, as is the process, we're going to do a bit of housekeeping, and we're going to find out what each other's been watching in recent weeks. Because I like to catch up on what Carl's been watching. Sometimes he gives me recommendations, and vice versa. So Carl, what have you been up to? And when I say that, I mean what have you been watching?
But yeah, away from Last Action Hero, my first pick that we're going to talk about. So I recently watched this as a complete random choice on a streaming platform. Basically, it's a film called Messiah of Evil from 1974. And wow, Jack, did I unearth I think a little forgotten gem here? I can't, I don't know if have you ever heard of it?
I've not, but straight away the title's grabbing us. So immediately, tell me more.
Well, it is in many ways the sort of ultimate 70s style horror film. If you sort of pick things that could only have come out or only look like they did in the 70s, this absolutely nails it. And a really interesting film. It seems to, looking across the internet, it feels like one that people have unearthed, and it's had various sort of releases, but it is kind of mostly sort of forgotten. It's just so interesting, mostly because of when it came out, because it's an early 70s film. It's a zombie film, so it's pre-Dawn of the Dead, post-Night of the Living Dead, pre-Fulci and all that kind of Italian stuff.
I haven't heard of this movie.
But it has so many things I want to recommend, because I wasn't expecting anything. I just put it on. I love a good 70s horror film. But this one, wow. Directed by Willard Huyck and his wife Gloria Katz. They wrote it as well. And it's a really early film in their career, but at the time it came out, they were already collaborating with George Lucas. They'd written American Graffiti. They wrote Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And he went on, Willard, to direct one of the worst films in living, I think in human history, Howard the Duck, which basically is, genuinely.
It's got a lot of hate. I quite like the Dark Lord bits, despite the actor who played him. I'm not vouching for him, but I like those elements. Yeah.
Yeah, let's be honest, it's not one I've returned to since I was a kid, but it is a very derided film. So kind of. It's this mad pedigree of these Lucas collaborators working on these classics, right up to this terrible film. But this is basically what can only be described as the kind of fever dream that can only come from either a student film or kind of super low budget independent film. It has an incredible art style. So the art direction in it is so powerful. There's very few locations. It's basically set in a seaside town. And I would say the mood you could only describe as I don't know if you're a fan of Lovecraft or kind of Lovecraft stories, but
absolutely.
It's basically got a kind of feel of like Innsmouth. It's that sort of Dagon seaside town with something to hide. The fog, I would say, very much. If the fog wasn't influenced by this film, I'd be amazed, because it is so similar in style. There's these weird things happening, unexplained sort of things happening in this town. But basically, it's got this kind of 60s freestyle, sort of almost hippie art style. That's kind of weird cutting, weird editing. cuts to these strange sequences that kind of almost don't fit,
Yeah.
don't make sense. Dream logic coming out of its ears. And as I was watching it, I realised, where it was in terms of its time that it was set and made. It was pre-Fulci, but it is the closest thing I've seen to the kind of Gates of Hell trilogy that Fulci did. That sort of City of the Living Dead and those films, that weird dream style. It's got that sort of acting that's on the verge of being, is it terrible? Is it good? Is it weird because it's the type of film, or is it just not, are they not great actors? But at the same time, you just can't take your eyes off it, because every sequence I was just going, I've never seen, this is really cool. I'm seeing something I've not seen before, with a couple of brilliant set pieces and some great little side actors and characters. I mean, there's a scene I won't go into, but there's a scene with a guy in a truck, and this actress, he picks her up in the night, and there's these weird people just sat in the back of his flatbed truck staring up at the sky, and he's playing this like Wagner-esque like classical music, and as she's driving along in pitch black, it just gets so weird what happens, and she's just like, you're just feeling like uneasy the whole way through it, and it leads to a really great set piece in a supermarket. So it's absolute unearthed a hidden gem there, I think, and I'd love to hear people's thoughts on this if they have seen it. Did they enjoy it as much as me? Because for me it was a 5 out of 5. Where's this been all my life? I would definitely be watching. Yeah,
I mean, I'm sold. Where did you say you watched it, or where can I watch it as soon as possible?
So it's streaming on Night Flight at the moment, but I wouldn't be surprised if you could get it on YouTube or something like that, because it's so independent, low budget. But yeah, it makes some amazing creative choices. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. I could probably talk for hours.
I think it's that creative choice. Like, would you say that it reflects, from what you've said so far, does it reflect the sort of stuff that you could get away with in the 70s and even the 80s that you wouldn't necessarily find today, in terms of that unease and those like weird choices that they made that pay off?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's basically an art house film. It's effectively an art house horror with this kind of, like I said, the weird dream logic. It doesn't quite sort of make sense. Sometimes things jump around, and some of it might be by accident. It might be one of those where budget played a part and they just had to, edit it in a certain way because they ran out of footage. Or, you know what I mean? But I think what it does do is it still makes sense, and when it wraps up, it's got this kind of framing device, and when it wraps up, you just sort of go, wow, like, I was interested, I wanted to know more. It doesn't explain everything, and I love that in a horror film. It doesn't go out of its way to explain everything. It leaves stuff open to interpretation, but at the same time, it's just a crazy, wild ride, and you're never quite sure where it's going or what it's going to do next. And I haven't watched a horror film like that in a long time, where I was just like, I genuinely have no idea where this is going.
My mind's immediately going, and I could be way off the mark here, my mind's immediately going to Phantasm, the first one. Very dream logic, very sort of like, where's this going, what's going on, and very, very, again, very low budget that you can tell, but it just worked. So everything that you're saying, I'm like,
nailed it. Like, literally, in fact, as I was watching it, that was one of the films I was thinking it felt tonally like, because exactly the same thing, where you're watching it and you're just going, this is so bizarre. Where's it going? Some of the scenes just seem to happen for no reason, but then they kind of, go to something completely different. And tonally, Phantasm is absolutely on the money. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Phantasm fans, I know I'm going to be watching. I hope you will as well.
I hope I haven't oversold it now, but yeah, definitely check it out.
You've set the bar very high. If it's anything short of brilliant, I'm going to be on to you.
Over to you, Jack. What are you watching?
Me, yes. So I've been hitting the cinema with a vengeance lately. So the most recent movie I watched was Wicked Little Letters with Olivia Colman, Jessie Buckley, and it's actually a true story of poison pen letters, I think is the term, that came out in this town in the 1920s in Sussex. I think it was like 1923, Sussex, in a town called Littlehampton. And there were these poison pen letters getting sent to this person, but they were so crass and they were so irreverent in their insults that they can't help. It's a comedy. It's a British comedy, but it's a retelling. But an example of one of the letters that she gets, and she's a very well-to-do woman. And as soon as she opens that letter, and someone's wrote to her anonymously, calling her a foxy-assed rabbit fucker. Like, just everyone laughing in the cinema straight away. It's just like, what is this movie? But all of the insults, and I'm only going to give you one example so that you watch this movie, but all of the insults are very much in that vein. And it's sort of like well, I want to say it's a whodunit, but I would say like the whodunit aspect is very soft at best. And you can sort of like, but even if you can see who's writing these letters a mile up, that takes nothing away from the enjoyment, because you've got Olivia Colman, who's a veteran in British comedy, and you've got Jessie Buckley, who I'm falling in love with more and more. Like, she keeps knocking it out of the park. Anyone that hasn't seen it, she was the lead in Men. You've seen Men, very good movie. She was also, funnily enough, she was. I want to say she was opposite Olivia Colman in another movie, but she was sort of opposite in the past, because she played a young Olivia Colman in the movie Lost Daughter. So the story was following this person with issues and past issues about her daughter, who was Olivia Colman, and then it would keep flashing back to what she was like when she was younger, and that was played by Jessie Buckley. But the two just bounce off each other so well. So you've got Jessie Buckley's this loudmouth sort of Irish drinker with like no fucks given attitude, and then you've got Olivia Colman, who's this like uptight, but she's very conceited, and the on-screen chemistry absolutely tremendous. But the way the world in which it's set is, I would say that even though it's a true story, the world in which it's set feels very fictitious. So you've got these humorous, incompetent police that just like aren't doing a very good job at investigating. It's very Hot Fuzz. That's the best way to describe it. Very Hot Fuzz-esque. But in no way is it like Hot Fuzz is its own thing. What separates this from Hot Fuzz is every now and again it gets pretty deep, it gets pretty heavy, and it gets pretty serious, like out of nowhere, but not in a way where this doesn't fit. It's just like, oh shit, didn't see that coming, because it's like set post World War One, so you've got everyone like sort of getting back like from that. There's a huge sort of women are second class citizens, because another one of the main characters is this police officer, but she's not allowed to have handcuffs until she's earned them, unlike male police officers, obviously. And it's just like Timothy Spall leads the seriousness in this movie. He plays a very overbearing father with old-fashioned values. But yeah, I'm not going to spoil anymore. I've actually done the review for the movie on jackedinmovies.com. You can check out my full review on there after you've watched it, obviously, because you don't want any spoilers. But I would recommend anyone that wants a good laugh with a bit of seriousness, if you liked Hot Fuzz, you'll definitely like this. But yeah, can't recommend Wicked Little Letters enough.
Great. Well, that sounds really interesting. Yeah. So tonally, then it's one of those where it handles both the sort of drama and the comedy, but sort of shifts gears between them, without it feeling uneven. Is that?
Yeah, exactly that. It does it so well. Like I say, it catches you off guard with the seriousness, because you're you're laughing throughout, and then the seriousness happens. You're like, oh, you like sit back and you're like, well, that was a bit much, but like in a good way. Like it pulled it off, and it's like, oh, that went a bit heavy, and then it goes back to the laughs. But the fact that it's a true story, because I think a lot of people, and I made the same argument, that it doesn't necessarily go as far as it could have, and a lot of people they could have definitely went further. But my argument was, well, it's a true story. There's only so much you can do, and obviously for dramatic purposes and stuff. But my opinion is, if the real events were as half as funny as what happens in this movie, then it's a brilliant window into a humorous part of British history.
Is it fair to say, like, Olivia Colman must be the busiest human being in Britain at the moment? I mean, she's just literally in everything, and she's so brilliant in everything.
Absolutely.
I mean,
she was one of my favorite actors for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it feels like she's in every film that comes out. I mean, I saw her recently in Wonka. She was in Secret Invasion. She's in this. Yeah. And they're all stuff that's coming out, not like 1 or 2 a year, but like 4 or 5. Her output is incredible. And she never phones it in. She's just a brilliant chameleon of an actress. I'll watch anything she's in. So yeah, I'm sold on that one, definitely.
You'll definitely enjoy. You'll definitely enjoy. At this point, we've both seen the same movie recently. I'm gonna let Carl lead the way on this one. Obviously, the movie that everyone's talking about at the moment, Dune 2.
Dune 2 was effectively my most anticipated film of this year. I just love big, ambitious sci-fi. I absolutely love Denis Villeneuve as a director. I just literally everything he's done has blown me away. So I couldn't have been more hyped for this one, really. It's funny because films don't feel as hyped kind of as they once did. And I feel like this has come out and lots of people talking about it, but I haven't seen like too many posters or anything. So it was nice to sort of go in. I hadn't really seen a lot, you know, and I've read the book, big fan. But I
I've
was
read the book.
but yeah, I've read the book. I even quite like the David Lynch version for all its failings. And what can I say? I absolutely loved it, Jack. And I think this could be an interesting discussion. But I absolutely loved it. Like on every level, I think it achieved everything I wanted. The only thing I said I walked out of it for my wife, and I just said that was just pure cinema. You know, that was pure cinema. If I want to go and see spectacle, it gave me similar vibes to, you know, coming out of the Peter Jackson films, you know, the original Lord of the Rings films, just walking out of something and going, I was taken somewhere. I was there. You know, it was so immersive. I was basically pulling sand out my arse crack. It was that immersive. It was just incredible, you know. And I felt it was everything I wanted a Dune film to be. Really, I mean, I think if people don't like it on a story level, I think they probably just don't like Dune. I'm not like some super fan, but of the book, but I think it is a great, you know, masterwork of the genre. And yeah, I think as far as adaptations go, it couldn't be done better. I don't think. So that's my take.
No, it's beautifully spoken, especially from a fan, and I think like someone that's read the book, especially because I've heard like from other people that it's a very hard read. So I'll put my cards on the table now. Not read the book, so I've just took the movie as it was movie value. I did a review for Jacked In on Dune 2, and you had a read as well. And it's I think the headline I posted was sort of like to not necessarily sum up my thoughts, but I didn't realize the amount of negative backlash I was going to get. So I got a lot of negative backlash of I appreciate that everything the movie was. It's an absolute spectacle. It's a mastery of cinema. So like I could go with theater and watch an orchestra just play the score for that movie with like projections on the back. So for me, the cinematography and the score. I mean, it's Hans Zimmer after all. Absolutely gorgeous. For me though, like it wasn't for me, and it was very much 2 hours and 46 minutes of sand for me, and I can't stress that enough. But like I say, it's got so much going for it. Like I love the its ability to not use useless dialogue. So like you say, it used silence to its strength. I loved the way it looked. I loved the cinematography. I even loved the ships. They felt very like I could feel the weight of them. Very industrial, very clunky. And when we're getting sort of an array of CGI spacecrafts in so many movies as of late, it takes me away because straight away I'm like, yeah, I can see. But like the more effort that's put in, the better, and that's why I really gravitated towards this. And it's funny that you used the comparison for Lord of the Rings because it felt very Middle Earth in space for me.
Oh yeah, because you're not a Lord of the Rings fan, are you?
I'm not a Lord of the Rings fan either. I was like, we'll not get any more listeners. I was going to keep that to myself, but
yeah, it's chalk and cheese then, because I mean, I eat that stuff for breakfast, you know, and
I felt that with this movie, I was like, I think Lord of the Rings fans are going to lap this up because for me, I think Kevin Smith, director writer Kevin Smith, said the same thing. For me, Lord of the Rings was very much just 3 movies about walking. And I'm very sorry, but it was like very much so with Dune as well. It was I wasn't emotionally invested in any of the characters. They all had that space accent that everyone has in the likes of Star Wars. It's sort of American, but like not really. It's like the spice, like everyone just talks like that in space. But like I say, I'm not trying to win anyone over with my sort of like, oh, you should think how I think. I'm just letting you know this is the experience that I had. Like story wise, character wise, not for me. It was very much just, and everyone like I think a lot of the people said, "What do you expect? It's Dune. It's on a desert planet." It's like I know, but for all its failings, like you said, I very much enjoyed the David Lynch version, and that's because there was so much variety. Different, like everything had a personality. The oil, the Baron, like everything was grimy. You had the desert, but then you also had the different spaceships. And I'm very aware that they crammed everything into one movie and that. But for me, it felt like I used this in my article. It felt like the original felt like Star Wars on bath salts. So it was just an absolute mind melter, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
That's its biggest failing though, because
It
Dune is
absolutely
not
is.
Star Wars. Dune is most definitely not Star Wars, and I think okay, hero's journey aside, it's very much the opposite end of the kind of space opera spectrum to Star Wars. Star Wars is all kind of fun and nice.
Oh yeah, like it's like a grimier version. It's like that's the analogy I would use. It like
Theo tried to Star Warsify Dune, and that's why Lynch hated
absolutely.
it, because he didn't want to do that. And I think, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting you feel that way, because I mean, for me, I don't know. I know some people just like their space opera to be, fun. Some like it humorous. Some don't like stuff that's really grim and serious or too epic. Or everyone's to their own. I mean, I totally understand people that that don't like stuff like that. I mean, for me, and I don't know if I'm just a miserable bastard, but I loved the fact that for 2.5 hours there wasn't one wisecrack, there wasn't one out-of-place bit of humour. There wasn't. It just took itself completely seriously, because Dune is a pretty damn serious book. With even if you take all the kind of huge prophecy, giant sandworms, all that stuff out of it, it takes itself seriously. And I think sci-fi can be taken seriously. And I've heard people, this is not aimed at you at all. There's other people that sort of go, oh, I don't like my sci-fi. It's too serious, or fantasy is too serious. Why can't it be serious? Why does it have to be cheesy? I mean, the only thing I disliked about Lord of the Rings was those little moments where he'd just give in to kind of the little side gags and the Legolas skating down the stairs, and all those bits. I was just a bit like, it's just a bit for the audience, Whereas I feel like Villeneuve made the Dune film he just wanted to make, and he didn't. It's almost like when he makes stuff, I get the impression he almost doesn't care what anybody else thinks. He's making the film he wants to make. And the studios are trusting him to do that, which is so rare, in Hollywood. Because I know a lot of people that didn't like Blade Runner, and I absolutely loved his version of Blade Runner. I thought it was outstanding. Not just
that's tremendous
visual spectacle, but I thought as a sequel, I thought it just worked on every level. But I know there are other Blade Runner fans who hated it, absolutely hated it. And
it very much encompassed everything that I would say the Blade Runner universe stood for. So it was a very good job at a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, I think just not at the risk of I don't want to turn this into a Dune 2 podcast, but I think just two quick. One you mentioned about the effects, and I think compared to the last, I guess, space opera film that I watched a few weeks ago, which was The Marvels. Comparing what Villeneuve and his special effects team pulled off versus what Marvel are churning out, it's embarrassing how bad the MCU stuff is. There was no planet, no situation, nothing in the Marvels that they went to where I felt those characters were really there. Whereas Dune, whether you like the desert or not,
you're there alongside him. You're definitely there alongside Paul in the desert.
You are in that desert, and it's because one, they used actual desert locations, and two, because the special effects are blended into that so well that you never for a second feel that they're anywhere but in that desert with those machines and those monsters and whatever around them. And I just think, hats off to them for doing that. And I really hope that this sort of causes a kick in Hollywood's arse, and Disney's arse in particular, to start just going, maybe we just need to put a bit more effort in, and start maybe making things that look a bit more real and lived in. The other thing is, it was just the fact that he, like I say about it being pure cinema, it's the fact that Villeneuve is so happy to just use like negative space, like we said, silence. There's moments, but he's also happy to kick in a set piece. But the set pieces again don't feel overwrought. That they feel very much part of what's happening. Yeah. But he changes gear so easily. But when he'll have like a big climactic fight or something, he's happy to just kind of let them get at it, but it also looked utterly beautiful. And I mean, I think the cinematography was out as well. So yeah, those are just my last couple of thoughts on it. I mean, I just it's the film. I cannot wait to buy a 4K projector and the biggest screen, or get the biggest telly I can, and just sit down and watch that whole 5-6 hour spectacle back to back. Honestly, that would be an absolute dream.
And just so that people like, I didn't mind Dune Part 1. There you go. But like for this one, just in case I'm being misconstrued, and it goes back to the variety. Like I needed a bit of variety. I'm all about like a long journey and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't like it. It's certainly not due to lack of wisecracks. I can't stress that enough. Like maybe if one of them said we've got company and then get attacked, like that's not what I'm after at all. But yeah, no. But if, like I said, I'm not going to give too much away, but absolutely feel free to not just read my headline and read the full review for Jacked In on jackedinmovies.com for Dune Part 2, because I do talk about the movie's strengths as well as, for me, what I didn't rate so much. Welcome back. So now that the housekeeping's well and truly out of the way, we're on to the third link for Chained. So I went ahead and chose the very massively underappreciated Last Action Hero. Now, for anyone that hasn't seen, this is a spoilerific podcast, so we're going to be going to massive depth. But yeah, just a bit of background on the movie and what it's about. Cheeky overview. So, Last Action Hero, 1993, directed by John McTiernan, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger. Very much a movie that flew under the radar when it first came out. I think it was a bit of ahead of its time. It's about a boy that is a massive movie fanatic, skips class all the time to go to his local cinema. Much like myself, I was an absolute movie fanatic when I was young. I didn't skip class though. And he stumbles upon a magic ticket, and this ticket possesses the ability to transport you into a movie. And he just so happens to be watching an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Jack Slater 4, when the ticket's activated, and he's sucked in, and he ends up having this mad adventure with one of his biggest action hero idols, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yep, he's playing himself. Well, he's playing two parts, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jack Slater, his favorite action hero of all time, and obviously action adventures ensue. But Carl hadn't seen this. I think, well, he's either not seen it in a while or he'd only seen it once. So he went into this pretty much not like with a fresh perspective, but certainly he was one of the people that it was one of the reasons it went under the radar. It didn't get the recognition it deserved when it first came out. So going into this sort of I guess you could say with a fresh perspective, Carl, after all these years. So glad you watched it. What are your initial thoughts? Let's discuss.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worth sort of saying, from the off, that at the time this came out, I was just a massive Arnie fan. Posters on the wall, all the videos, at home, watched again and again and again. And he could almost do no wrong. He was on genuinely one of the best runs in cinema. There's a few blips, some films that people might not necessarily like, but when you look across how he sort of controlled his career and the choices he made, there was just so many classics of the 80s in there. And, coming off the back of arguably, his biggest triumph, but arguably one of the greatest action films of all time, Terminator 2, I couldn't have been more excited about whatever he was going to do next. But there was also, I remember at the time, the rumblings around how he wasn't necessarily entirely happy with the fact that every one of his films had a huge body count, and kind of he wanted to start doing slightly more family friendly stuff. And word came out that he was doing this comedy, that it was a takedown almost of his career. It was going to be a bit of a spoof. And at the time, I was a bit of a teenage snob about it. I'll be honest. I was like, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see Arnie, take down the things that I love. And so I didn't actually bother watching it for a good few years. I just skipped it, like probably many other people. And I think it was around probably 2000 or something that I ended up watching it. And I actually really enjoyed it. At the time, I remember thinking, yeah, that was good, silly fun. But I hadn't seen it in probably 20 years. And coming back and watching it, I've got to be honest, Jack, it's great. It's aged like fine wine. I just thought it was just a really fun couple of hours. I laughed my ass off, and thoroughly enjoyed it, start to finish. I think actually it's worth diving into the type of film it is when it came out, the ahead of its time that you mentioned, because I completely agree. I think this film preceded, obviously, that whole wave of kind of postmodern film, Scream, Freddy's Nightmare.
Very meta.
That meta, inside joke. I mean, everybody does it now. The internet is awash with that. You can't move for everything getting meta now. But in 1993, it was quite rare. There were other films that had done it. And it wasn't just a spoof. It went beyond that. It was actually looking at that whole genre, that whole period, by people who were at the absolute top of their game in that genre, and kind of poking fun, but also I think at the same time, I think it's a massive love letter. I don't think it was like John McTiernan turning his nose up at what he'd done.
No, not at all.
And it's not. I don't think it really was Arnie kind of looking at his career and going, "Oh, I'm embarrassed, by how many people I've killed." It's like it went beyond that. I think there's definitely a lot of affection in what they pulled together.
They're making nods. They're sort of saying like kudos to this, kudos to that. Like, this is the stuff that people love. And you're with Danny, the young boy, and I think like he is a vessel for audiences. It was very much the same way of The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent with Nick Cage. I was living vicariously through Pedro Pascal as a massive super fan, and I was very much doing the same with Danny. I was living vicariously through him, wanting to be like this kid in a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but not Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Arnold Schwarzenegger that I thought existed when I was a young boy. So this action hero, this portrayal of that's who he got hung out with, the on-screen version, not the actor, if that makes sense. And because of that, he just like beat after beat after beat just keeps giving you the amazing stuff that Arnie does in movies, the amazing one-liners, he drives without holding onto a wheel.
You're driving with no hands!
I think it's easy if you practice a lot and never ever do it in heavy traffic.
And like I say, we're not going to do a blow by blow, but it's definitely best to start at the beginning. So for me, I didn't see this movie when it first came out. Like I was quite young. So for anyone listening, I was born in 1991. There you go. This movie came out in 93. Gosh, shaking his head. But I was raised on action movies. I was raised on old school action movies. I was raised in front of a TV, in a good way. I had very caring parents, don't worry. But they knew I loved movies. So, but I watched all of them, and one they never showed me was Last Action Hero, and I think I stumbled across it, and I saw the artwork. So I've got it here. So I saw it on VHS originally, but I saw that amazing cover, and it's Arnie like bicep holding on with one hand, swinging out of a cinema screen with explosions. I think there's a dinosaur in the background and shit, and it's like. What is this movie? Why haven't I seen it? I asked the parents, and they were like, "Oh yeah, it's all right." And that was them telling us about the movie. Like they didn't rate it. And, like I think the audience at the time didn't. I was like, "Oh well, I'm going to watch it anyway," sort of thing. And I absolutely loved it. Like I had no idea why people didn't love this movie. And then I rewatched it recently to prep for this, and it took us back to what I heard, what people were saying about it when it first came out. In that. I don't think they realized what the movie was trying to do. I think they thought it was just another action movie because it was kind of portrayed that way, sort of like. So there's two worlds in this movie. It's the Jack Slater universe and then the real world. And it opens on the Jack Slater universe. And you just think you're watching it. It's so cleverly done because it's literally like beat for beat. It's like an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. And you see him like walk across the car in snake boots. He's lighting a cigar. And you've got the angry black captain that's always shouting. And you just think, this is just another action movie. And then it gets to this scene where he's on a rooftop with his kid. And the guy's like, get rid of your gun, Jack. And he's like, all right. And he throws it. And then he's like, what, you think I'm stupid? Like, and then he's like, all right. And then he proceeds to take out like 10 guns. And it felt very much like National Lampoon's Loaded Weapon at that point. Or like Spy Hard or, Naked Gun. And I was like, right, that's when it goes like, right, this is what we're doing. And it was that moment I was like, okay, yeah, we're not sitting then pans out and it's a kid watching a movie. But it is a spoof in the movie. But when you're in the real world, there's no jokes to be had. Like it gets pretty serious in the real world. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I think actually Loaded Weapon and that's a great comparison because Loaded Weapon is spoof.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, that's what I thought this was going to be. And I didn't want to see that. I didn't want to see Arnie spoofing himself. But I don't think, although there are spoof elements to it, and it pushes things to a slightly silly level, it's just heightening. It's basically just Arnie's career turned up to 11, isn't it? It's like everything is just a bit more over the top. From a guy who was already a human caricature in all his movies, they just cranked it up just another notch, And I think that's what separates it from being a pure spoof, because exactly what you said, it's when he comes into the real world, it doesn't become a spoof. It's not a spoof. It contrasts the difference between what can be kind of that larger than life, ridiculous kind of the muscly machine gun toting action hero, versus like what would happen in real life if you tried acting like that. And but at the same time, I love that when he gets to real life, like he still does heroic things. He still manages to do some of the things his character would do. It's just they're grounded in reality. And I think it was very clever because that's where it becomes, it's more sort of meta postmodern than it is a spoof, And I think it's interesting because Loaded Weapon actually came out, if I remember right, a year or two before. And that is obviously a total takedown of every one of those cliches. This is much more, it's affectionate towards those cliches. It takes those cliches.
It's self-aware.
Yeah, self-aware. Exactly.
And like, whereas, like I say, with Loaded Weapon, it'll do a bit where it's like, that's a piss take of Lethal Weapon. Oh, that's a piss take of Die Hard, and you know exactly what they're doing. Whereas in this, every time something like that happens, the kid calls him out on it. It's like, there's no one finding this a bit ridiculous. There's no one finding that he does that throughout.
Yeah,
and like.
He's our proxy, isn't he? He's the audience proxy for the entire first half of that movie, and I think it works. It works so well, And I think what I love about it is it sets up actually this kind of one key moment where it really establishes the tone. Well, maybe two key moments. Yeah. One is that first scene, because, like you say, it is the opening of every Lethal Weapon movie or whatever. He's walking across the roof, but the thing that really gives it away, you sort of think this feels a little over the top, but then it does that shot from the roof, and you see there's about 400 police cars bumped. And it's like you would get that in an action movie, but it might be 10 cars. But there's like literally like every car in the city, and it's almost Blues Brothers-esque at that point. That's where you sort of go, I see what they're doing. It's ramping up to 11. But then the other thing is, the spoof bit comes in from the kid's imagination, and it's the brilliant early scene where he's in the history lesson or the English lesson. They're learning about Hamlet, and that goes into a spoof. That is proper spoof, but it's the spoof from the mind of an imaginative, film-loving kid. And I'll be honest, it's the same shit I was thinking at his age. Exactly nails exactly what a teenage kid who was into those movies thought all the time. I was constantly thinking, what would Arnie do? Or in this situation, God, this is boring. What would Arnie do?
I used to daydream about movies all the time, like especially in history lessons. But it's the color grading on the Hamlet. It's like black and white, but like it goes into color when he kicks him through the window. It's one of my favorite one-liners of the whole movie. It's when they're doing Hamlet, and then he pulls a sword on someone. He's like, stay thy hand, fair prince. And then he's like, who said I'm fair? And then he gets out the Uzi. It's just like, yes to all this.
He's just walking through the castle. He's just like nailing guys with the Uzis. It's so good. And then the massive explosion at the end. I mean, it's literally pitch perfect. It's pitch perfect. But it's like, that's the bit where you go, this is a spoof, but it's in his head. It's a spoof. There's a reason there's that spoof happening. So, and then it kind of leads into everything else. And I think that was so clever. It was really, just really good. Apparently, I was reading that the original script writers, before it got handed over to Shane Black, thought that was like one of the worst bits of the film. They hated all that stuff.
Oh, really?
But for me, that's the stuff that really works, because you just go, this is so ridiculous, but it's brilliant. Brilliant,
and it's brilliant for the kid as well, because it's like this situation couldn't happen to a better deserving kid, because let's be honest, his life's not the best. Like the flat he lives in and stuff, and like his only solace are movies, and he's like absolutely obsessed with Arnie to the point where he's daydreaming about him in history lessons, creating a massive rendition of Hamlet. But then like it's showing you how like obsessed and how dedicated to movies this kid is. So I feel like that scene needed to be in there, because it was a testament to his character.
And fair play. I mean, I think it's fair to say, looking at this now, you just go, it's a shame it flopped, because Arnie is just like at the absolute top of his game in this. I mean, he understands his persona, his brand, to put it in modern terms, I guess, he knows exactly who he is. And there isn't a scene in the film where he isn't absolutely, I think, perfect, at what he does. People at the time, I think people just wanted him to fail because he was just on such a great run. But also, I think people just hated that whole persona. You know, that larger than life character. He was a caricature to the press. You know, people wanted to slay him for his accent, his acting. But the thing is, I don't think he was ever a terrible actor. I don't think I think he always knew exactly what he was and how to portray himself. And it never comes across more. I think the opening where he's walking across those cars, and then you just get the sort of low angle shot of him and his jawline, and he's smoking a
cigar.
Just absolute kind of movie star magic. You know, Tiernan knows it.
Oh, absolutely.
And yeah, it's and then it just riffs on that for the rest of the movie.
And I've never seen it. I was really trying before this. I was really trying to think of a comparison, being like, if this movie, imagine if like sort of like this movie was done now by so and so and so and so. But I couldn't think of an example. Like at first, my head went, imagine like Michael Bay directed a spoof of track, but it wouldn't work. So I was like, no, that's not it. But when you think about it, you've got John McTiernan as the director, who was making nods to something he was more than familiar with. I mean, the man did Die Hard, he did Predator, and then you've got Shane Black, who wrote it, and then you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger. And not only that, it wasn't a sort of like a cash grab. Like, I mean, for everyone that likes it, like I like The Expendables, but it was very much everyone like beyond that prime, sort of coming back for one last shout. But this was done in his prime. You hear about movies that didn't get made, and you think, oh, that would have been awesome. Like, this is one that got made. He was in his prime. Everyone was at the peak, and like all the parts just fit. So why it didn't work? Like you say, well, it was made too ahead of its time. To go back to that point,
was it ahead of its time? Was it maybe slightly too late? You know, did kind of maybe Loaded Weapon, maybe that kind of stole some of its thunder, or kind of put it on the wrong foot. Maybe people were expecting something different. I mean, any earlier and it wouldn't have happened because Terminator 2 hadn't happened. But I sort of feel like historically it almost came out at just the wrong moment. There was a thing that I was reading today, and it said, I hadn't realised, but Bill Clinton had just been voted in when this came out. It came out the week after Jurassic Park. It was almost like everything was going against it, because obviously with Bill Clinton coming in, there was more of a turn towards kind of liberal politics. People were against that kind of, I guess, everyone saw the gun-toting thing as very Reagan. It was almost like it just was at the wrong point, in history. And I think because of that, it almost got pre-stamped, pre-labeled by expectation of what it was going to be. Like, was it celebrating gun violence? Was it a spoof? Was it? But I think all three of those people were at the top of their game, at the height.
It had so much credibility, but it's the exact same thing. It came out way ahead of its time. It came so the wrong time is the best way to say it. Like I reckon if it wasn't up against Jurassic Park, people might have paid attention more. It's the exact same annoying thing that happened with John Carpenter's The Thing. It came out at the exact same time as E.T. It got pushed to one side. So Steven Spielberg, I love you, but you've ruined a lot of lives.
In a way, long term, it's always probably helped that, doesn't it? And maybe that's the same with this film. It was classed as a flop, wasn't it? And I looked and it was like, it made money. It just didn't make anything like the money that Arnie films were making. And I think it's like it was classed as a flop because of that. It didn't double its budget, which is always the kind of, I suppose the minimum expectation for a film to be a hit. But it's like, I think over time it probably didn't have much to make up, and it has got a heck of a following now. I think it's regarded as as another great movie in Arnie's.
Oh, everyone that goes back to it, like, I mean, yourself included, absolutely loves it. I guess a confusing element to add to this. So this came out in '93, right?
Yeah.
And he was kind of making fun of everything that he'd done up until that. Well, not made fun, but he was like having fun at his own expense, sort of thing. And then afterwards, he did another Terminator movie. He did True Lies. He did Eraser, and it was kind of like, oh, you're going back to those movies, but you've already sort of made fun of. So, but then he went back to those movies. So this sits right in the middle, and it's just like, it's weird because now you're just going back to doing those that you've already made fun of. You've made fun of the one-liners and stuff, and then you've. Well, I mean, what do you think? It is weird that he.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's weird. It's funny thinking about it, because at the time, I was so happy he went back, and I mean, I absolutely, I've already said, I'm a Cameron apologist. I love everything Cameron does, and True Lies, I love it. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah,
it was exactly.
I enjoyed them as well. That wasn't me saying I didn't enjoy them. I'm just supporting why this movie was. It added to the confusion that was this movie.
Yeah, and I think it didn't help that he also then started trying to do more and more family fare. I mean, if you think off the back of this, he did Batman and Robin.
You are not sending me to the corner.
God forbid. He did Jingle All the Way. Which, you know, has moments.
I like Jingle All the Way. I watch it every Christmas. I don't care. It's a fun time.
It's pretty bad. But it's funny, but pretty bad. I mean,
time.
Thirds. I like the first two bits. It's the last third rubbish. But it's the most 90s things, you know. And I think he then tried going back to what was seen as his core is, but it was kind of almost the action thing had moved on by then. And I think that's why those later films, you know, from Eraser onwards, they never hit the same sort of height. We got into like 90s action, Michael Bay action, and it just didn't quite gel. It almost was like the end of that era. So actually, it was timely, but it wasn't timely at the time. If that makes sense. I can't think of any other sort of films that have come out in the same way that kind of maybe were you know, now retrospectively kind of so perfect when they came out. You know.
No, it hasn't been done. Like I say, I was trying to come up with a comparison, Nathan, that's been done like it since. I mean, you made a brilliant reference for Scream, but it's a different kettle of fish. I mean, you've got the likes of Space Jam, you've got Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which came out prior, and all these movies are in the same vein, but this wasn't the characters that made up this world. It was two different worlds, and one was fictitious, and so for that reason it was very self-aware. But what differs this movie as well, and this is something I wanted to move on to, was for all the spoof and the camaraderie and all the sort of like nods to the action, the jokes at everyone's expense. I want to know what you think of this. It gets like really deep and it gets like really sad in moments. So the specific moment I'm on about, and when you first see it, is when Danny's in the Jack Slater movie, and they've been like shooting people up all day. He's had his one-liners, he's had his zingers, and he disbelieves Danny. And then all of a sudden, you see where he lives. You see where Jack Slater lives, and obviously you would never see where he lives in the movie. So there's been no effort put into this house at all. It's just like this shallow one-bedroom flat, like it's like a studio apartment next to a highway. And he walks in, and there's someone hiding in the closet, and he shoots him, and there's the joke. He goes into this moment where he's talking about how he originally joined the police force because he wanted to be a police officer, and then he found himself getting in more and more like ridiculous adventures. And what was even more bizarre was he's like, I kept surviving, sort of thing. And he's referencing there obviously how you always have to go harder in the sequels, but he's just like baffled how he kept surviving. And he's just like, but you can tell he's just so sad. He's just sitting in this sad flat being like, I just keep surviving, like I just wanted to be a police officer. And then he's just saying like, oh, my daughter, like I really just want to her to go to prom alive. And like she's like at home, like rearranging a gun. You can tell he's like sad about all these elements of his life. And then the saddest moments when Danny's like, "Well, come on, like you've got a lot going for you. I mean, your ex-wife still loves you." And he's like, "Do you think I'd be stupid enough to go out with someone that wouldn't know the difference between myself and a tape recorder?" He's like, "I pay someone." He says, "I pay someone around the corner to make those phone calls so that the guys down at the station think I have a life." And I'm just like, this is just getting really sad at this point, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then at the end, it doubles down where he actually meets the real Arnie. I'll touch on this only briefly. He meets the real Arnie when he's sort of like, "Oh, you should do like headshots for me." He's like, don't talk to me. You've brought me nothing but pain." And I'm like, what? Like, Jesus. So like, yes, it's a spoof, but it's like this person trapped in this fictitious reality that clearly hates his life.
Yeah, that moment where he meets himself. Rather than being like eye rolling. Yeah, it's pretty. I thought that was pretty. Yeah, really, really good, really impactful, because I think he has got a kind of not a brilliant life. He's got the life that you want as a teenage kid. You watch it thinking, "Oh man, it must be awesome being this, huge action hero." But yeah, it does make it feel very sad and lonely.
Absolutely.
Did you get the impression when he came over to the real side that he was almost like he could have stayed, almost like he wanted to, or do you think he wanted to get back? Obviously at the end, he has to go back or he's going to die.
He has to go back because he's like you can tell that he wouldn't survive. Well, it's clearly proven. Like he wouldn't have survived. Like had he not gone back into the picture, because he's living his life vicariously as if he was, like carefree. Rather, he's living his life carefree. Because in his world there's no consequences, and he I like how it slowly does it. It builds it up. So he first gets there, he shoots the car. It doesn't blow up immediately when he's after Benedict. It doesn't blow up straight away. He's like, huh. He's looking at the gun as if something's wrong with the gun. At first he's like, huh? Like that normally that. He's like, here's another explosion for your movie, kid. Doesn't work. He's like, huh. So he's like, what do I do? Then he goes into a taxi to steal a car. He's like, that hurt. He's like, yeah, that doesn't work. And then he plays chicken, and no one swerves. And then obviously the climax is he gets shot, and it's not an action movie, so it's not just a flesh wound. It's like, no, you're gonna die here. So I don't like, even if he did want to stay, I don't think he would last very long.
Yeah, you don't think he could have, learned a different way,
Just reined him in and just told him like maybe.
Come on, he's stunt double. I do love that moment where he's like, "Wow, you are the best looking like I've seen." That was pretty.
I like him plugging the Planet Hollywood as well. Like, was it Maria Shriver's taking him aside? She's like, "Don't talk about the restaurant. Just don't talk about the restaurant." And then, like, the biggest man in Hollywood right now is like, talking of Hollywood, like, these restaurants, honestly, they've got real life memorabilia. And she's like, oh my God.
I think what I loved about that is not only is he taking, like Arnie kind of riffing on his career, but it's riffing on Arnie himself. It's the fact that he's willing to go there with jokes. Because, I mean, the thing is, I've read his autobiography. There's obviously been that series on Netflix, and he's very self-aware. He's incredibly intelligent.
Very intelligent. He's very
super intelligent.
Yeah,
and the fact that kind of got rolled in as a joke, he's willing to have that little poke at himself, it's great, and he was, and it very much feels like that's almost like something he put in the script. I can't imagine somebody put that. I feel like he put that in, or was just like, oh come on, that would be funny, because he seems like a guy who's not afraid to,
I feel like as well you've got John McTiernan and Shane Black, like, writing and directing, and they're people that presumably know Arnie quite well, so they wrote the perfect part for him.
I guess this sort of moves on to my second point, actually, really, which is about what it gets right, in terms of the tone and the feel, but also in a strange way, the action scenes are 80s action scenes ramped up to 11. I've said earlier, but I think the 90s kind of became that. If you think about all the action films towards the latter end of the 90s, they got away from the kind of body count and the oily men with machine guns, but what they did ramp up was almost like the silliness. You think of Bad Boys and those type of films like The Rock and Con Air, and they started to get so over the top that actually it kind of, as an action fan, it sort of alienated me a bit. I really didn't like where action.
Oh, really? Okay.
I was not a massive fan of those. I mean, The Rock I like, but I think for a lot of those films, I just was like, oh, this is so over the top. So it's funny that he was riffing on kind of his career and how over the top it was. And yet actually what they are great action scenes, but just dialed up. The thing where he's swinging on the wrecking ball and the helicopter, and it's like you could imagine that being in an Arnie movie. Yeah. It's just ramped up. If Arnie had made an action movie even 5-10 years later, that's the exact kind of scene that is in the movie, but without the tongue in cheek.
True Lies, when he goes over the horse, the slow-mo going over the horse, it's just like, this is just like, you know what I mean? It's, you've done this exact kind of stuff before.
In fact, and actually, I hadn't seen Last Action Hero when I watched True Lies, and if I had, I'm wondering now whether I'd have been looking at True Lies going, that's a bit much.
Yeah.
It's not much anyway. I'm not saying I thought the horse scene was like, realism, but it was like, it's just funny that they kind of set this tone that is, self-effacing, kind of, winking at the audience. And then basically that's what cinema became, was almost like the whole thing was just winking at the audience.
It was exactly like Danny served that purpose, because in any other movie, like for instance, if you took away Danny and I was just watching Jack Slater 4, I would have probably had a good time. Like it's nice that he has these little quips. Like, was it like, tar sticks to most people? Like when he's just like wiping it off.
Well, that was, I mean, yeah, that's where it really does become spoof, doesn't it? There are some moments where it is just pure spoof, and I just love that. That was like a Simpsons or a Naked Gun moment. I mean, I just bloody love it when he just walks out, just just comes off. So good.
Brought a spare pair of clothes, thought you might need them.
Yeah, there's some really interesting sort of design choices they make. They ramp everything up. Like the whole thing's ramped up. But I love the fact that he's sort of going, why are all the women so beautiful? Why are they wearing like the weirdest outfits? I mean, that almost wasn't based on anything. It's not like you go back to the 80s movies and women are wearing these like crazy outfits, but it was just it just worked in the world of that film. And I think you've got all the little cameos, the Sly Stallone as the Terminator. It really, like, so many little details it goes into, and it just gets everything right. It's everything you kind of want to see. That's the Sylvester Stallone thing at the time. That was a massive thing, right? I mean, they had this rivalry, even though they started a food chain together, and everybody wanted to see them in something together. I loved all those little nods and winks. That's the stuff that just, I think, works just beautifully. It still does.
So one of my favorite parts in the movie is you've got the side character Nick, who owns this Grand Cinema, and the Grand Cinema is very much the tone of the movie, in my opinion. So you've got the red, like, velvet seats, you've got the big curtain, like the big stage. And God knows how he keeps this place open, because he's only ever got one guest, but he's a brilliant character. And to take you back to the plot of the movie, what I was mentioning at the start, the magic ticket. Now, it came into Nick's possession because when he was younger, he watched Harry Houdini perform. And he said, and after the show, he came up to him and he sort of did a little gesture like this. And then all of a sudden, this appeared in his hand.
Very nice.
The actual ticket.
So have you? Did you inherit this then?
Yeah, from Harry Houdini. Yeah, he did the little gesture, and then that appeared in his hand. But like, even that aside, I love that gesture. Like, that for me was more entertaining than if the ticket actually appeared, because Nick's like it just shows him as a really like old school like guy that he's got nothing really except the cinema. And I love that little gesture he did, and then
I mean, even that relationship. I mean, I think. Well, I mean, the magic ticket thing. Just to quickly touch on that. I mean, how just beautifully high concept is that? I love the fact, and this is such a kind of 80s, 90s thing where you don't need to explain. Just don't need to explain it. You just have a magic ticket. Harry Houdini did magic, therefore magic ticket.
Magic ticket. That's all you need to know.
And I love that. I feel you'd almost struggle to get that by audiences now, because like everyone's so bloody cynical. It's like everybody would just be like, "Oh, where's the bloody magic ticket? How does that work? What are the mechanics of this world?" And I don't. What's the canon of this ticket?
It doesn't matter. You tear it. And it comes to life. And I'm going to be honest. I'm so tempted. Like, it's gorgeous that I was like, oh, I wonder if I tear it, but I'm not going to. I'm just gonna keep it aside.
I do find it funny that he, because I love, in a weird way, I love seeing Nick's projection booth. I absolutely love probably one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen is Cinema Paradiso, and I was just thinking, how much should Nick have just torn it and just gone into that movie?
You can see how regretful he is. He's just like, all these years, and you can see him like, shit, all these years I could have used it, and he's like absolutely traumatized.
Yeah, he could have been in there. It's funny because that relationship, it's such a classic cliche of the time, was like the old guy with the kind of, it's the Doc Brown, isn't it? It's Doc Brown.
I think it's brilliant that they existed. It's a shame that I don't think you can get away with them anymore. Old men young lads, but there you go. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this kid, like, he seems to just be actively encouraging him to just leave, to get out of school. I mean, that would never fly. And weirdly, his mum didn't even seem bothered.
It wasn't crazy, but back in the 90s, like they were just crazy old kooks, and that's as far as it ever went,
Yeah. What do you think of the New York as it's portrayed?
It goes back to what I said about the seriousness of it all. So what separates it from just being a spoof is very much how the real world from the fictitious world. And this year, New York is not nice, like, at all. And I've seen this before, and everyone talks about like going a bit, and I'm going to go even more serious here, pre 9/11 New York, like it was in a really bad way. And then after that, like, shit started getting cleaned up, communities started coming together. And this is like the likes of if you've ever seen it, it felt like the New York and Jason Takes Manhattan. Very grimy, very dirty, very crime-ridden. And you're introduced to that pretty much straight away when Danny, the mother leaves him alone, and because she works the late shift, as mothers do, another trope, but it's a very nice one. And he's like, all right. And he's like, well, no, like, screw that. I'm going to the cinema. And he opens the door and he literally just sees someone walk past and he shuts it. And it's like, this is a kid that knows, like, anyone's bad news in this block. And there's like this bar pry in the door. It's like, it's locked, but then there's this bar that's like built in. It's like, Jesus, like, what's this block? What's this neighborhood? And then this guy breaks in, like, chains him to a sink, and then it stops being an action movie at that point. It starts being like, no, this is a kid, like, and I think he's sort of like, he just watched a Jack Slater movie, so he's like, he tried to confront him, and the guy's like, go on then. Just turns his back, puts the knife down. He's like, go for it. I don't care. And he doesn't. And it's like, that's because this isn't a movie. And then
and I think that's one of those scenes again where it really sort of sets the tone in a way that kind of moves it really far away again from just like spoof, because it's I think that was pretty short, if I remember. I was struggling with the order, but like I remember that's pretty shortly after the Hamlet scene, and you've got this kind of crazy sort of scene in his imagination, but you're brought like thumping down to earth with a scene that's actually like putting into his perspective, like really scary and terrible sort of moment. And again, it's like so when he gets pulled into that cinema screen, you really feel like he needs an escape from this grotty reality he's living in. I think it's great because it doesn't play it for silliness or laughs or even like any kind of wackiness. It's played dead straight, that scene, and I really like it. It's funny because in a way it's a funny callback to literally what we were saying in episode 1. We were saying about I think I mentioned about like the punks in American Werewolf being kind of very different to the way that New York is portrayed. And I mean, this is just proof, even 10 years later, New York, you open your door, you get mugged. I mean,
like, as much of an action movie this is, it was like, no, this isn't action New York. This is real New York.
I must admit, there is a big part of me, though, that would just love to have gone down 42nd Street. You see when he walks out and there's all the cinemas, street, and you just think, oh, just that's a time I'd love to go back to, but maybe not stay.
Back on the point of the power of the ticket, obviously we're only really getting introduced to Jack Slater and Benedict coming out in that world, and brilliant cameo actually of Ian McKellen from, I think it's meant to be The Seventh Seal, comes back as Death, and he does it brilliantly. He has such a presence. He's walking down the street, touches the police that's smoking on the shoulder, and he starts choking to death. And, like, absolutely inspired choice. But for me, it was very much, when I watched this growing up, as much as I love Arnold Schwarzenegger, like, I only saw a fictitious Jack Slater come to life. I didn't see The Running Man. I didn't see Dutch. I didn't see The Terminator. So I saw Jack Slater come screen, but there's this one scene which I absolutely loved, because especially when I watched it when I was younger for the first time, it gave us hope. And it's when he's like, he goes on this big rant, Benedict, the villain, and he's got the ticket, and he's sort of like, the villains here always win. I could bring back King Kong, Freddy Krueger, Hannibal Lecter. Like, I think he even says Hitler at one point. He's just, and then he even mentions like Rosemary's Baby. And I grew up on horror movies, so I watched that. I was just like, oh, is he going to bring them? Is he going to bring them? Is it like we're going to see like arm in arm with Freddy Krueger and Hitler? I don't know. That would be, but for that reason, it was very much like, I wish those people had been brought out, or like that is literally the only downfall I can think of. But then again, it leaves it to the imagination. Imagine if he did. The cameos in this movie, like the nods to, so we do get it in some form. I mean, we'll get it's very brief, but we'll get Robert Patrick as the T-1000 storming past Danny, and even he clocks him. He's like, oh, what was that? And that's who it's meant to be. You get Sharon Stone from Basic Instinct. You get Danny DeVito as a talking cat, and obviously they've been together on the likes of Junior and Twins. And I mean, I just like that stuff. Like, so maybe those other characters actually coming would have been overkill.
So just to wrap up, then I guess final thoughts on Last Action Hero. Any just a quick summary of your overall opinion.
Meta, way ahead of its time, deserves a second rewatch if you haven't watched it in the longest time. Absolute phenomenal. I think it's like it deserves like a massive round of applause for what it is. Like, especially from a cinema perspective, it's far more intelligent than anyone gives it credit for. And I think there's close to saying there's nothing wrong with this movie. I'm close to saying that everything they set out to do, they executed perfectly. Everyone was in that prime. It was the perfect collaboration between director, actor, and writer. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up for me.
Yeah, no, I think I second that. I mean, I think it's I wouldn't say it's flawless. I think there's some things maybe that kind of, haven't aged so well, or a bit too 90s. But I think actually for what it was trying to do, it has aged like fine wine. I laughed my ass off like watching it, and I think you're absolutely right. If you're an Arnie completist or just an action movie fan of the 80s, or kind of have got into that side of things in the years since, missed those halcyon days, it is a brilliant take on what was a fun time in cinema. I think at the time people found these films excruciatingly violent and they were corrupting society and all the rest. But actually, there was something so like simple about like a good guy getting the bad guy, and the film is just a massive love letter to that. And it's also a complete, a really good look at the career of Arnie and those sort of action movie stars. It is so smart. It's got one of the best. I mean, honestly, I think now on rewatch, that Charles Dance performance is up there as one of the great movie villains. I mean,
for sure.
It's just so perfectly, perfectly in tune to what the movie he's in. All of that stuff has aged really, really well, and I think because of that, it weirdly, like I said earlier, feels like a gateway movie between the 80s and the 90s. It's like a farewell to the 80s, but it kind of sees in accidentally where action movies went and actually got a lot worse. I would much rather watch any of those 80s movies over stuff like Bad Boys, and I don't think that's necessarily a terrible film, but I don't go back to 90s action movies. I just don't. Whereas 80s ones, I would watch any day of the week. And maybe that's because of the Arnie fanboy, but,
They started gravitating away from, because originally the 80s was very much, we're going to get these people that aren't trained actors, that are just massive, like, wardrobes. They're just hench. They just look good on camera, and we'll just teach them to act. But the pendulum swung the other way in the 90s. They're like, oh, we're just going to start getting like trained actors and make them fit, like sort of thing. So you had the likes of, like, use as an example, like Bad Boys, but like also the likes of Speed. Get Keanu Reeves in. He's a good actor. Like, so let's just make him fit and like just put him in those kind of movies. And that's pretty much where movies started to go.
To be fair, though, to Speed, like, it did unleash the beast because, my God, hasn't Keanu Reeves become an action star since then, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't think at the time anyone saw that coming. But
everyone was just like, the guy from Bill and Ted. He's chasing a bus. What?
But like, if there's anyone who does deserve kudos for how he turned himself into an action star, that boy is what.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, because that's when you start getting John Cusack and Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage was an action star until the 90s, and it's the choreography got worse. These guys were, I don't know, but they just went. Everything just got so. If the Last Action Hero was at an 11, by the end of the 90s, everything was on a 12. And I just, that wasn't for me. It wasn't for me, and never has been. So great film. Thank you, Jack, for picking that. I really enjoyed revisiting that. Happy to help. It's been a lot of fun. Now I think let's move on to talk about your featured actor, Jack. So talk to us about Charles Dance, why you picked him, and what you think of him in this film.
So I think it was such an inspired choice. So him as Benedict, it was playing. So this movie just plays on every trope imaginable from action movies of that period, and one of the tropes was always, well, you would have a posh British villain. And Charles Dance was the perfect choice for that. Like, he's got so much background. He's such a sort of like icon in British cinema as well. So to cast him, it's the exact same as what was done with the likes of Alan Rickman as Hans Gruber. It's just like, if like in the same vein, and funny enough, John McTiernan did that one as well. But he presents himself so posh, but like they've even got like, well, he needs a gimmick as well. So I loved his gimmick. The fact that like he was brilliant shot and the glass eye, and he always had a different glass eye. But for me, my God, he just like, if nothing else, he just conducts himself so cool. He's so cool. Like, I loved his suit. I love when he takes his blazer off. He's got the gun holster. He's got the long, like, silencer. He's got the sunglasses. Underneath, he's always got this eye. And I don't know, just the way. And one of the things that I love about his character as well is how he keeps correcting his Sicilian schmuck of a boss. And, like, I think he finally comes to blows where he's... and because I love this particular line because it's one of my pet peeves. And it's when his boss is in the swimming pool, like, and he realizes he's been deceived by Benedict.
What is this, Benedict? First you're my friend, now you turn a 360 on me.
180, you stupid spaghetti slurping cretin. 180. If I did a 360, I'd go completely around and end up back where I started.
What?
Trust me.
It's like, I just hate it when people say this. Right? So I love that of his character, but it's more like when he comes to the real world and he finds out that villains can win. At first, I think the real world's a bit too much for him, and it's that scene where you see him running up to the criminals. He's heard gunshots, and then he has like a ruckus, and then he sees people run off, being like, "Grab the shoes, man! Grab the shoes!" and they run off. And then he walks up confused and he looks down. He's like, they were just killing him for his shoes. They were just killing him for his shoes. Like, he's baffled that that's how this world operates. It's not a big heist. It's not a big, like, super villain type crime. It's like, yeah, people just in another, like, sort of, like, to how bad this New York is. People kill you for your shoes here. But then it leads into my favorite line of the movie, my favorite quote. And it's when he walks up, he wants to put it to the test, like, there's no consequences here for criminals. So he walks up to someone, like an auto body, someone. And then he's like, excuse me, like, I just, can you help me with something? He's like, yeah, sure, what's up? And he just gets his gun out and shoots this guy. And then you just hear the thud. And then but it's like the little face. He's like looking around. He's shot someone. He's like, hello? I've just shot somebody, and nothing. And he's just like,
man.
Yeah, I'd like to confess, I've just shot somebody, and I did it on purpose. And they're just like, shut up. Like, and he's just like, all right, okay. And then that's when he realizes.
I mean, that's the other classic from that time, isn't it? I mean, you think like Coming to America and stuff like that. It's just the moment you do anything in New York, there's somebody that just goes, shut it, buddy. That was just perfect.
But it's such a, like, I know we talked a lot about British mentality in the first one, and I think he conducts himself like a British person. Like, I did it on purpose. It wasn't an accident. He just conducts himself like a true Brit in that moment. But like the reason I like him so much is he's a genre actor, because he always plays that type of person. Like, we touched on him last in Alien 3 in the last episode. If you haven't seen it, give it a listen, because we do touch on Charles Dance's performance in that. But he always plays this upper class sort of Brit, and that's very much shown in his catalogue. But what do you think the way he is in Last Action?
I think what I love about Charles Dance's performance in this is it rides an incredibly fine line. You know, I think many actors would have just chosen to play it 10% bigger than he does, and it would have been like really out of character. It could have ruined the movie. You know, it could have been just too over the top, too cheesy. Like he sort of does it with almost like the tongue is in his cheek, but he's also got the gravity to carry, the gravitas to carry the part off. What I love about him is he plays it almost straight, but there is 100% like a wink at the audience at the same time. And like I say, that is a really tough thing to pull off. And his career is kind of all about that, really, isn't it? Because like you say, his strength is just that. His strength is very much in the ability to play that kind of upper-class Brit, and he can switch very easily between kind of being quite threatening and quite polite and nice. And I think in Alien 3, we saw that kind of side of him that was almost like that was quite half-found human and kind of like he had a dark sort of past to that character, but he's very
well-to-do.
Yeah, well, but I think he's very much sort of an educated man and plays that very, very straight. In this, you get those same qualities, but he's just got that slight tongue in cheek that's pushing it far enough, and he delivers, the lines. Like I say, when he kills his boss in the pool, which is off screen. I mean, he just literally shoots him off screen, doesn't he? And then that's it. It's you can tell the whole way through. He's the henchman who's had enough. And you think about all the movies in the 80s where you get these henchmen who are smarter, more dangerous, more violent than their boss, who usually is a sniveling weasel. And you just think he's almost living out the fantasy of every single henchman that's ever been, because like I think in so many films, where you just go, that guy looks way more capable than the main guy. And like Gary Busey in Lethal Weapon or something. Why isn't he running everything? Why isn't the other guy? He's way more dangerous. And I think he just shoots him. It's like he's like living out that fancy. But I think his every scene he's in, he absolutely steals the movie. He's just incredible throughout it. I think he never, the tone never changes. When he's the same when he gets into reality. He's sort of absorbing. He's such an intelligent guy. He's just absorbing what's around him. And I almost slightly disagree. I think when he's looking at the guy getting robbed, I don't think he's shocked by that. I think he's just sort of processing and sort of going, okay, this is even better than where I come from. Like, I can do anything and get away with it. I think he almost misreads it, because obviously you can get arrested for that stuff.
Well, it was at the time where, at that moment, just before that happened, which kind of led me to believe that, he thinks this world's a bit much, is when the woman comes up to him and opens her jacket and he responds with, "How old are you?"
Yeah.
And he just like, forget it, and walks off. And I'm like, oh shit, was that a bit much for him? I don't know.
Yeah, but that's more that sort of I guess the upper crust, sort of side of him. He's like, it's like, he's a terrible human being, but with a sort of moral compass, weird moral compass. But I love the way he is definitely like, he's so much smarter than any of the other bad guys in it. And I think, it's nice to see the intelligent, henchman get his moment, but that leads, of course, to a really great finale as well, a really great conclusion where I think it thematically it brings everything together. That rooftop scene, it's great. You not only get that kind of moment where he gets to save his son, but that kind of finale,
Redemption.
It works for me, very much. Like I think Charles Dance on the rooftop scene, very powerful, delivered brilliantly. Again, straight, plays it straight, and I he is dangerous. He's dangerous when he needs to be. He's not a caricature of a dangerous person. He is just a dangerous person.
Exactly that. And he reminds, once again, it's the same way that Arnold Schwarzenegger is in this movie. It ran the same risk, that you think you're just watching an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, and very much so with Charles Dance. You feel like you're watching an actual villain in an actual action movie, because he's not playing it, like you said, he's playing it straight. He's playing it like an actual British henchman in an action movie, one that becomes self-aware, realizing, like, I don't have to follow orders. And it's incredible he's acting like throughout, when he's getting abused by his boss. It's just these little facial things. You can tell he's not saying anything, but you can just tell it's getting to him. And then by that time that he shoots him off screen, you're just like, I saw that coming. He's had enough.
There's an incredible intensity about Charles Dance. I think that's always been one of his best points, isn't it? He's able to really switch that intensity on, but never overdoes it. He's he never plays it like a really evil,
reserved. He's evil but reserved.
It's very, very good. I mean, I think it exhibits a lot of what makes him a great actor. I mean, what other sort of things stand out to you if we sort of go away, I guess, from Last Action Hero? Like, how does that sort of compare, I guess, across other things you've seen him in?
He's very much like Jenny Agutter in that I feel like he's always the same. He's a genre actor. He's very much the same person, and just in different vessels. Obviously, outside of this, he's most recently, well, not most recently, but his most infamous role recently, Game of Thrones, and that he very much played a very intimidating yet reserved. I always thought, like, to comment on a role that I always thought he should have had, and I want to know your perspective on this. I always thought he would have made a great Sherlock Holmes, like in his prime. Like, if he tackled Sherlock, I mean, he was in Murder Rooms, which was a Sherlock Holmes story, but he played like Sir Henry something. He wasn't Holmes, but I mean, what do you think about that? I think that's the biggest missed opportunity for me in Charleston.
Yeah, that would be very interesting. Yeah, he's absolutely got the intelligence. I think some actors, display all sorts of different characteristics, and I think the word that you can sum up Charles Dance with, it's like emotional intelligence. Like he comes across as a very smart actor in every role he plays. He always feels dangerously smart. Even like obviously in Alien 3. He's clearly the most intelligent man on that planet. In Last Action Hero, he's clearly the most intelligent bad guy on the screen. And I think, just going quickly back to Game of Thrones. I mean, he's ferociously intelligent in that series, and was just utterly dangerous from the first moment you see him. I remember like his entrance in Game of Thrones. You get Jaime Lannister walks into a tent, and there's just Charles Dance skinning a deer, and he skins this deer as he's delivering this like intense sort of speech, and it was just he's magnetic. You're just like you would, if you were his child, you'd be terrified of him, and if you're his enemy, you'd be even more terrified of him. And I think that's how I felt about him all the way through Game of Thrones, and I think he's
never scared. I would make that point as well. He's never fearful. Like even if he's on the receiving end, even if he's like numbers up, even if he's like he's like I say reserved, sociopathic, very intelligent, and like goes back to the Holmes arguments. I've never seen him frustrated in a role. I've never seen him flapping about like even in Alien, where he bit it. Like never. He was never worried. He was never, and I feel like he constantly displays that. Like even Game of Thrones, the arrow was pointing at him on the toilet. He knew that, but he just spoke to him like he wasn't bothered. Cool. Like he wasn't. Yeah, he played it cool.
You got it absolutely right. Like I think it not. Yeah, that's probably his other characteristic is his coolness. Like he's coolly intelligent, and I think that he uses in so many different roles. Like and because of that, I would argue he hasn't got one type. I think he's got two, because he's either the really sort of intelligent, like intense villain, or he's the sort of bureaucrat, aristocrat, whatever it might be. That kind of is magnetic. You're either drawn to him because he's intelligent and cool, or you're kind of terrified of him because of those characteristics. Absolutely. And I think that a lot of his career is that. I mean, he would, just to go back to your original question. 100%. He'd be a brilliant Holmes, right? I mean, he's got the coolness and the intelligence to handle any mystery. You can imagine him with a room full of people explaining the mystery, in the smartest way possible. Yeah. He'd be a brilliant Holmes, and I wouldn't necessarily say is it too late for him. I don't know. I'm not into Holmes enough. But
maybe a Holmes coming back to solve one last mystery, like an aged Holmes, finally kicked his opium addiction. First movie I ever saw Charles Dance in was Ali G in the House. Funny enough, I guess you could call him the henchman to the Prime Minister. He was the Prime Minister's second in command, and he just wasn't having any of Ali G's guff.
Wow. Do you know, I haven't actually seen it, but I saw the YouTube clip of the dance. The Charles Dance. And it was amazing, because literally that's the only thing I've ever seen of him where he actually really does mock himself to that degree. He's genuinely like a very serious actor.
Like in a mini skirt, fishnet, he's all tarted up with lipstick. But once again, tell anyone that knows the scene, go back and watch it and look at his face.
That's what I did.
Face, reserved, cool. He is not bothered. He is just doing the dance, like the Charles Dance dance. Yeah,
he's just like humiliated, but carrying it with such a
carrying it as Charles Dance would. Just cool.
You can imagine this guy is utterly unflappable. I don't know what he's like in real life, but he must he projects that sort of intensity. So
he does that thing on there's a Big Fat Quiz of the Year when he reads from a book, but he reads like lyrics, and you have to answer what lyric he is. But he'll generally read some sort of R&B hip hop, like really crass. And he's talking about like big bottom bitches and shit like that whilst reading it, but he's doing it like completely Charles Dance, and then you have to guess what song it is, but he does it Charles Dance, and it just makes it all the more funny.
I'm gonna have to look that up now. Oh, that's brilliant. Yes, I mean, it is exactly probably what I expected, which is like, for somebody with that level of intensity, they usually have quite a wicked sense. To be honest, I think that's quite a characteristic of a lot of these sort of RSC, ex-RSC guys, Ian McKellen and, all these, Patrick Stewart, they're all ex-RSC. They've all got a brilliant tongue-in-cheek way about them, but can be the most intense actors. I think it's the stage background, isn't it? I mean, and I think you can really tell the difference between somebody who is classically trained like that and that sort of very British training, and maybe other actors who would have been more shouty, screaming, and ruined Last Action Hero completely.
Like you made the comment before, if Gary Busey was in that role, it would have been insane. It would have been like chewing up the scenery. It would have been overacted, like times a million. So it's a testament. It's a testament to Charles Dance and other actors of that period for sure.
Yeah, he's very good at playing characters that do what they feel need to be done. He's a man of conviction. I think there's a number of roles that he's had in the past like that. I mean, I was saying earlier about the T-shirt. The reason I like that is because I forgot again that he was in Godzilla King of Monsters. And actually a massive part in that. He was, but he's not. He's the guy in front of the guy. He's working for another shadowy organization, but he brings the intensity, he brings the conviction. He's the man who's got the plan to save the world, and it might seem like a ridiculous plan because he wants to unleash monsters on the earth, but it's like he plays it again just really straight. It's funny because I saw an interview with him where he says, but they said about that role, and he said, all I remember is I just shot people. But it's like he was very, again, quite self-facing, tongue-in-cheek. But he even in that moment he brings a lot of the time in Lannister to that role, I remember, and just got intensity. He's a man with a mission. He intends to see it through, and he utterly believes in that, regardless of what anyone else thinks. And he's very good at those kind of roles. Is there anything on his sort of IMDb that you haven't seen that you think that you wish you had, or kind of any big Charles Dance sized holes?
Like I said, I'm definitely going to go back through his catalogue because one thing I've noticed is that regardless of the movie that he finds himself in, like once again the controversial movie that was Alien 3, he was the best part of that. He always gives 100% in each role, 110% in each role, whether he's even as a side character, whichever world he finds himself in. So I'm going to work my way back through. But like I say, the only Charles Dance hole in my life is that we didn't get him as Holmes in like the 90s, maybe. But if Charles Dance has ever listened to this and a script for Sherlock Holmes ever comes across your desk for Sherlock Holmes solving one last mystery, just take it. Give it. Your fans deserve it, absolutely. And
I think just to kind of, I suppose, do my own take on that. It was interesting because one thing I saw that he played in 1989, and I'd love to find this, is he was in a TV series called Goldeneye, where he played Ian Fleming. So it's not an adaptation of Goldeneye that became the film later. This is actually an adaptation about the life of Ian Fleming. And he played Ian Fleming, and it made me think, actually, is there an alternative reality, a Last Action Hero reality where he's James Bond? Do you reckon he could have? Because I think he has the same kind of Daniel Craig intensity that Craig has, but kind of maybe not the bill or anything. But I think he is I think he's a good looking guy. I can't speak for the female population, but I would say that he's probably sexy in his intensity. Could he have carried Bond off? I think so.
In a very maybe a more Roger Moore portrayal. Like Roger Moore was very like well-to-do, like very very posh, well-spoken. I feel like everyone gave their own bits, but I feel like Charles Dance's would be closer, not like Roger Moore's, but I think it would be closer to.
Yeah, I think he would have been the kind of almost like the middle ground between Moore and Connery.
Yeah.
He had that intensity, but also that upper crustness.
Yeah, for sure.
That would have worked quite well. So really, that's something actually I saw that I was like, oh, I really want to watch that. And I think one of his other biggest roles that he's been really celebrated for was Gosford Park, which the Robert Altman film, and I've never seen that, so I'm going to try and get around to that at some point. So that's got like everybody on earth in it. If I, I'd have been spoiled for choice. But it's definitely like a few things on there that I was like, but I love the Holmes idea. That's really good.
So yes, very excited about the next bit. So it is, we've watched The Last Action Hero. I've spoke about Charles Dance in great depth. So you know the rules. Next up, Carl has to choose somebody that was in my movie and talk about another movie they were in for the next episode. So, drum roll, I'm very excited. Carl, what have you chose?
Right, yeah. So, I mean, this was a difficult one because there's just so many routes I could have gone down, and there's some very obvious ones I could have done. So, obviously, Ian McKellen was a huge temptation. And as was the thought of making you rewatch Fellowship of the Ring, actually, but decided not to torture you. So, but yeah, there was one actor that I thought was great. Actually, we haven't mentioned him at all in this, but I thought he was brilliant. And almost like the moment he walked on screen, you knew he was going to have a heel turn. You just knew it. And that was F. Murray Abraham as this kind of FBI, CIA kind of partner, who's a guy who's popped up again in lots and lots of stuff. And it wasn't something I'd forgotten about, which I want to revisit. I want to revisit it because it's just, again, a really interesting combination of creative talent. Because he plays quite a big role in Mimic by Del Toro. And
wow.
I have not watched that film in a long time. And I remember having very mixed feelings about it. And it's one of the Del Toro films I have not revisited. And I thought this is a perfect opportunity. So my choice is F. Murray Abraham, and we're going to be watching 1997's Mimic.
Very, very good choice. That is a blast from the past. I haven't seen that movie in so long. I remember it being very of its time. Initial thoughts, but my God, yes, I'm gonna rewatch Mimic. I'm very excited. Jesus,
I think a bit like Alien 3. I think very divisive. We'll see if this goes round full circle. But my thoughts at the time, I seem to remember, were I really like about 2/3 of it, and I didn't like the finale. And I'm really excited to go back to it, which is kind of a bit similar to Alien 3. So yeah, be interesting. We're kind of hovering in the 90s. So yeah, at some point we need to get out of the 90s. But I think certainly
we'll just see where the chain takes. Well, absolutely.
Precisely. Yeah, it's a good midpoint of everything from I guess across our lives. So it makes sense.
Sure.
So
well, I mean, at least we're hopefully going to be getting out of the British hole that we've unintentionally put ourselves in, because we had the first one was Jenny Agutter, and then that led on to Brian Glover, and then I started talking about Charles Dance. So who knows? Maybe we'll start
Yes, true, exactly. So yeah, I don't think there'll be many options on that side of the pond out of Mimic. So yeah, great. So we'll be moving on to that, and see where that takes us on the next one.
Right, so that's all for this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in. As always, support is so much appreciated. So if you like, share, follow, subscribe to our channel, all our socials @Chain Podcast, that would be great. Those are on there. We've got articles, reviews, recommendations, and we're venturing into the podcast realm ourselves with interviews of filmmakers from old, good, bad, niche, new movies. So get involved. And for both channels, Dark Matters and Jacked In, like, share, follow, support is very much appreciated, and it allows us to keep doing what we love, which is talk about movies. We don't have a sign-off line, so any suggestions, any comments that you have, absolutely let us know. Anything you want. What would you have chosen for the next episode? Anyone that was in Last Action Hero? And we don't have a sign-off line yet, so suggestions are always welcome. So for now, see you on the next link.